Good evening, Facebook. This is your co host, Nodella Jordan, and I have Derek Walker here on the phone because we still have not found a way to navigate to where we could do a live broadcast with both of us. So, Derek, I want you to greet the people.
Hello, everybody.
All right. So tonight we are going to get into a very good discussion. And, as I've shared previously, the broadcasts are live and interactive. So please be sure to post your comments, post your questions, um, and we will definitely give you an answer as best as we can. Also, just to let you know, that Derek will only be on the show for about a half an hour because he got some school work to do. But we are going to have some fun tonight and we are going to have a great discussion. So, tonight's topic of discussion is I saw a post last year from a gentleman who on Instagram who posted that there was 8 types of intimacy. Now, those of you who have read my book, you know that I talk about 5 types of intimacy, or let's say 5.5 types of intimacies. And so I wanted to visit that because I don't want to come off being closed minded. I really want to be open minded, and I wanted to see what this individual had to say, what other additional types of intimacies he was talking about. And truthfully, I was very surprised to see that I talk about the 5 types of intimacies and he talks about 8, but we only had a couple that actually were compatible, which I thought was very interesting. But as I began to think about how it came about for me to write The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, I understand why there's such a difference in our approach in identifying different types of intimacies. My book was more so developed based from a spiritual perspective. And so, as I wrote the book, Holy Spirit told me that these are the different types of intimacies I want you to address, which is spiritual, mental, emotional, verbal, non-sexual, physical, and then sexual. And I wrote them specifically in that order for a particular reason. So I don't know if we're going to get a chance to get into that tonight, but I do want to get into, while I have Derek on the line, while he's available, I want to kind of get into the crux of these other types of intimacies that this person had written about. And, once again, I don't want to come off as if, my book is the only thing, and, that what the other person wrote from their perspective is wrong. Um, but I just, thought it was pretty interesting to see how his writings were, totally different from mine. But like I said, is that when I wrote mine was more from a spiritual perspective, to whereas his was not necessarily, because as I read the content and Derek and I was actually going over it, we actually had started the live before we went live. And that's how our conversations go. We kind of questioned, his perspective of where he was coming from and how did he come to the conclusion of identifying his types of intimacies. But once again, I'm not going to bash him. We're not going to bash him, but we are going to have, an open conversation about, his definition of the other types of intimacies, and how valid are they, and are they applicable in your life? Are they types of intimacies that you've even thought about yourself? All right, so Derek, you have any comments you want to make?
Not yet. This is going to be a good topic tonight because, like you said, we started our conversation before you went live, and so this will be a great opportunity to kind of address other people's perspectives. and see what they may have left out, or again, what we can learn from what their perspective is.
Yes, yes. All right. So, for those of you who do not have my book and have not read my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, I identify, like I said, let's say 5.5 types of intimacies. And the reason why it's half, because physical, non-sexual, and sexual, I really kind of lump them together, although I talk about them separately. So I guess technically I'm talking about 6 types of intimacy. But the first one that I started out with as I began to write the book was spiritual intimacy. And I share in my book, and Derek read the book and he knows it very well. I talk about how spiritual intimacy is the highest form of intimacy that we can ever experience. And so this person who wrote 8 types of intimacy, his write-up on spiritual intimacy is totally different from what I wrote. Now, my perspective with the spiritual intimacy, it includes Father God. His does not. I don't know what kind of spiritual intimacy he's talking about, but in my mind, there's only one kind of spiritual intimacy because only one person created all intimacies. Derek, what do you have to say on that? So I don't want to get off, because I can go running. Derek?
Go ahead, Nadella. I'm here. I'm kind of like festering on the fact of the spiritual intimacy side, that he really does not address the spiritual. He addresses individual spirit, but without God in it, I'm just a little confused how he can discuss spiritual. And their definition of spiritual, I believe, is just only a belief of how they think things are. To me, it's like a learned ability. Churchgoers, they go to church frequently. This is a formality, and this is what we do at our particular church. This is how we do it. But that's it.
Yes. And that's my thing is that, spiritual intimacy, just spirituality, to me, I don't know how people are coming to the conclusion that there's more than one type of spiritual intimacy. And as I shared with Derek, is that my son, who he's not my biological son, but he's my son, had just shared a post about how many millennials are leaving religion and becoming more spiritual. And I'm like, okay, but if we understand, for those of you who do read the Bible and who believe in God the Father, I'm not understanding how they're coming to the concept that they can have spirituality without the true and living God. Because without him, I'm not understanding that. Now, I know you can, because that's what they're saying you can do. But in all honesty, my personal understanding and all of the readings that I've done concerning spirituality, it surrounds God. It surrounds the Father in heaven. So I don't know what spirituality that they're talking about. And so I told my son, I said, listen, I'm not a religious individual. I am a spiritual individual, because truthfully, our natural origin is, or our original origin is spiritual. Derek, you want to chime on that?
I think, Nadella, I remember in the Bible where it talks about they that worship God must worship him in spirit and in truth.
Yes.
So the spirituality is the part of the body that pretty much, that the inner side, the heart, that the things that manifest from the inside to the outside.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things that this particular individual or author may have neglected in some of his writings is to kind of address that spirituality the way it should be addressed.
Right.
I mean, we as Christians say we worship God in spirit and truth. So they that love him is going to worship him in spirit and in truth.
Yes.
So spiritually, I can understand on one one aspect where he may say, okay, the spiritual aspect, that's because the saying, when two or more are gathered together in my name, they touch and agree. That's a spiritual thing, because if we touch spiritually and we're in the same aura, or in the same space, or in the same mentality, then we can make change. But I think the other part is that, again, what kind of spirituality? You have atheists out here, you have all different types of religions out here,
Yes.
or people out here.
Yes.
And spiritually, that doesn't mean we're connecting.
Yes.
So that's where I'm a little kind of baffled that, it's good that people touch a surface of something, but you have to really explain your definition of it. And I'm not one to say that the individual is wrong for what he believes.
Right.
But he needs to expound more.
Yes.
So that people can truly understand where he's going.
Because to me, his statement seems to be somewhat misleading. And for someone who may not be as inclined as we are spiritually, they definitely can be misled. And like you said, we have a lot of occults out here. We have a lot of religious organizations out here, and many of them are misleading. So I just think that, when we see someone talking about spirituality, we need to investigate and ask them, well, what do you mean by spirituality? Because when I read his note, he says, let me pull this up because I am online. So let me pull this up right quick. And because I want to read the whole thing of what he said regarding spiritual intimacy. Because his explanation, the way he explains spiritual intimacy, is not what I'm talking about in my book. I'm talking about spiritual intimacy with the Father in heaven, with God Almighty, with God All Supreme, Yahweh, Jehovah, So let me just read quickly his full content on what he's saying spiritual intimacy is. He says this is when the relationship truly starts, which I disagree, but one of the hardest stages to achieve. I disagree again. A lot of wedded couples never attain to spiritual intimacy. Again, I disagree. An absence of it is a key reason numerous neglect to survive. When the couple advances to this stage, there is a meaning to the relationship. You have common ethics, qualities, and morals. Your fates are presently comprehensive in both the short and the long term. You know you have achieved this type of intimacy when you no more refer to you and your couple as individuals. You and he or she are we, and that's a huge thing. Derek.
Okay, so let's start here. Number one, I think that he mentions it, but he doesn't go into in depth about it. Individuality first, and that's the key thing. He doesn't discuss where an individual is within themselves spiritually, because you can be a couple and you guys can both be spiritually minded, but have different opinions of what spiritual means.
Yes,
that
for you as
that does not balance you.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that he failed to talk about. That's why there's so many disagreements in relationships, because spiritually you believe one thing, your partner may believe another thing, and you're not balanced.
Right.
So
right.
I really he fails to go into that the individual has to be spiritual, have met the burden of their own individuality of being spiritual.
Yes.
Which means, because you're not going to be connected with something that doesn't balance you.
Yes.
And so that's one of the things that I didn't hear him talk about. He talked about after, and he doesn't talk about the things that you have to do before you get there.
Yes.
So that kind of alarms me, because, again, you cannot go from relationship to relationship and thinking that it's something wrong with the other person, but you have not tapped into your inability to understand yourself.
Right. Right. So
No
let's go.
problem.
So let's go on to another one of his um intimacies. So once again, in my book, I identify spiritual first and foremost. I then identify mental, and the reason why mental comes next, because you cannot have emotional, verbal, or physical, or any kind of physical intimacy if the thought is not in your mind. We are not walking around as mindless people. We have thoughts first, which determines our next course of action. It determines how we're going to feel about someone, how we're going to feel about something. So this is why mental is listed next. Then we have emotional, because once you have come into a conscious state of mental intimacy, you then begin to connect with your emotions, because your mindset also, once again, it contributes to how you feel. When I look at, so let me put it to you this way. When I look at the color black, it makes me feel a certain way. Or when I look at the color yellow, it makes me feel happy, because yellow is a bright, vibrant color. But black is more kind of a I mean, it can be vibrant depending on the person's perspective. But to some people, they could look at it as it's not so happy color by itself. So when we tap into the emotional, the mental once again is connected, but without the spiritual, the mental intimacy, you may have it, but it won't be at a level of satisfaction. The same with emotional intimacy, the same with verbal intimacy. So once you've identified or developed mental intimacy and emotional intimacy, then you're able to move into verbal intimacy, meaning that you're able to convey what you're thinking and or what you're feeling. And so once again, they're written in this specific order for a reason, because this is how intimacy unfolds with us as human beings. And then the last intimacy is the physical, non-sexual, and sexual. After you've experienced all the other forms of intimacy, the sexual intimacy actually is the last of them all. I like to say it's the culmination of all the other types of intimacies that you've already experienced. So this guy identifies an aesthetic intimacy. I'm like, what the heck is aesthetic intimacy? So it says, having a common, now let me read it from, because now that I have it up on my page, it says aesthetic intimacy. It's like meeting a new friend and being amazed by the amount of things you two have in common. To reach this level of intimacy, you'll have to begin to know the other person's taste in music, movies, food, etc. You and your partner are aesthetically compatible if your decisions in music, theater, and home furniture / decor are tastes each of you can acknowledge, live with, and impart together. However, they may not be precisely the same. And so Derek and I, we're trying to figure out what the heck are you talking about? Excuse my strong language, but that's how I'm feeling. I'm like, what is this guy? What are you talking about? Aesthetic intimacy. And I just feel, because we have the freedom to speak and to write whatever we're thinking or feeling or whatever, this is what we do, because I'm like, this doesn't even make any sense. And once again, Derek and I was trying to discuss these before we came on, to try to get a grasp on what this individual is talking about. And I'm gonna be honest, we were stumped, because we're like, what is an aesthetic intimacy? That doesn't make any sense. Derek, what do you got to say?
I think one of the bad craziest things, like I said, I, again, like I said, I don't hear him talk about love. I don't hear him talk about respect. I mean, those are levels that you have to get to, and if you can't get to that level unless you go to the other levels before. So I mean, I'm stumped. But again, that's because if people are not careful,
yes,
the Bible says we perish for lack of knowledge.
yes,
And the thing about it is that we need to obtain knowledge. That's in any cult, they have followers because those people lack knowledge. They
Yes.
listen to one person, and that individual can brainwash them.
Exactly.
So, and that's the thing is that in his teachings, it seemed like they believe that they can be that by them just telling you that this is this is that and that is this is that it's true. And because I said so, that's like a parent teaching a child how to walk or crawl. Or they ask the parent a question, and the parent says, "Well, no, it's this way because I told you it's this way."
Yes.
Not one time did they go in and to test the water to see is that theory actually correct.
Right. Right. So, once again, as we talk tonight about just from a general perspective, because truthfully, to talk about each of the 5 intimacies or the 6 intimacies that I've written in my book, each one I could actually have a full broadcast on, which we'll do probably not next week, because next week Derek is going to be teaching on something more specific. But coming up in future broadcasts, we're going to actually spend time with each individual intimacy and really get into them, because once again, when I wrote the book, it's not about becoming famous. It's not about becoming rich. My wholehearted desire really is to help us all have a better life of intimacy. Many of us, we're only experiencing spurts of intimacy or moments of intimacy. But I desire that we get to a point of having a life of intimacy. Well, Nodella, what is the difference? Because just as I said, you may have your spurt of intimacy and then it goes dormant for however long. You may have a moment here, have a moment there. Usually moments of intimacy are planned, but a life of intimacy generally is spontaneous. Moments of intimacy are sporadic. A life of intimacy is spontaneous. You don't plan it. You just decide one day, you get up and say, you know what? I'm going to have some time of intimacy of whatever. And that could be you want to go to the ice cream parlor and have some ice cream, or you decide to go for a run, or, whatever the case may be. And this is where we need to get to, not only for our relationships, but even just for ourselves. Because in chapter 3 is dedicated.
Nella, to add to that, it's funny that I learned that when I was in school, the definition of ugly. And
okay.
The word ugly, if you look at each individual letter, it says you got to love yourself. So
wow.
So when it says that somebody says you're ugly, that's a perspective from what they think. But if you love yourself unconditionally, then ultimately you learn to become intimate with yourself. Because no one, regardless of how a person's perspective is of you, you're going to always feel like you're successful.
Yes.
You're not going to let anybody change your mind or down or put you in a rut where you're doubting yourself or you question yourself.
Yes.
So when I learned when I was going through school and they were talking about the word ugly, and one of my friends said, "You got to love yourself. You have to love yourself unconditionally to get to intimacy and to be intimate with yourself."
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And so once again, my book serves so many purposes. And the first version that I wrote, it's kind of on the small side. So I'm being asked, is there going to be a part 2? So what I may end up doing is I may end up doing a revision to the original version, or I may come out with a part 2, because even after I've written it, this book is now almost 5 years old. I have still gained even more knowledge. I've still gained even more insight after I wrote the book. And I was like, man, this would be great in that book. Hearing people's testimonies who've read the book and how the book has truly changed their life. I want to incorporate their testimonies in the book as well, so people can see that it's not only enough for you guys and gals to read The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, but you must take what you're reading and put it into action. Otherwise, it's just nothing but another reading that you do nothing with. And that's not my purpose for this book. I want each and every one of us, when we read my book or even listening to our broadcast, I want us to start taking what we're reading or what you're hearing from the broadcast and start applying it to your life, and you'll find out that this actually works. It actually works. And so I just want to be transparent, because Derek only got a few minutes left before he has to log off, is that when guys, express interest in me, the first thing I start talking about is intimacy, but I immediately check. Now, I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. And so that's when you will lose a person. And I'm not talking about just men. I'm talking about women as well. If that's not what their intent is, then they'll let you know, I'm not interested in that. That's not what I want. I just want to, have a relationship. I just want to kick it, whatever. I'm not looking to get that deep. And so if you are struggling and having a hard time finding that person or meeting that person, then also take it as a note that they're not where you are. And if you still end up getting in a relationship with them, then you're going to end up getting hurt, because they're telling you in advance, I'm not looking to get that deep into a relationship. I'm just looking to have a relationship. We have fun, we kick it, whatever, and I'm good. Derek, what you got to say? Because you got 10 minutes, and I know you like to be punctual, so.
Well, I mean, like, the subject is, there's so much stuff I can say about it.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's an individual who accepts. This is the difference between when we make or break ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
In relationships, we go through things because we allow ourselves to be put in certain situations.
Yes.
And so when we're put in certain situations, it's because we never studied the situation before we got in it, or the individual before we got with them.
Mm-hmm.
So to know yourself, a lot of people say, well, I just settled. Well, that's why you're still where you are, because you just settled.
Yes.
And
yes.
To me, if I want to grow, I want somebody that's trying to grow.
Yes.
I don't want somebody who's at a standstill in their life and they're not trying to better themselves.
Exactly.
And so people settle for things that they don't want because they're too scared to go out there and achieve, to go get or apply themselves for what they're compatible to be with.
Right.
And so by settling, you miss out on so much.
Yes.
Because now you've torn yourself. You're injured. And so when you injure yourself, you sit there and you keep licking your wounds. You keep licking your wounds, but you keep going back in the same situation.
Right. Right.
And so at one point you're going to have to clean up yourself.
Yes.
Growing up, I always used to say I'm going to be very important.
Yes.
And so what I did as a child, I would go to school and dress up. I would dress in suits and dress clothes and everything, because ultimately this is where I am in my career now.
Yes.
It's because I put myself in that position to be who I am, because I dreamed it, I pretended that I was that person, and I grew to be that person.
Right.
And so when people don't do that, then they're stuck.
Yes. Yes. And once again, the purpose of me writing The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, is in hopes of helping us all to have a better relationship, even if it's with no one but ourselves. Because many of us know there are people who are not happy with themselves. They are not happy with the skin they're in. Some people wish that they was somebody else, or they, wasn't in that body, or whatever the case may be. But when we reach a point in dealing with intimacy, and because with intimacy, it's going to force you, it's going to cause you to have to deal with yourself. Because as I was writing this book, I actually had to stop at one point, and I had to deal with some of the things that I had gone through in my life in order for me to write this book successfully. And also, I didn't want to write the book and not even truly believe in what I was writing. I wasn't going to be a hypocrite like that. So I actually had to stop for a minute and examine my own life, examine all of my relationships. And I'm not talking about just relationships with men. That's why I said all of my relationships, not all of my relationships with men, but all of my relationships, including my relationship with God. It caused me to have to examine, what kind of relationship do I have him? Now, I'm talking about how we're struggling at being intimate, but I'm like, well, am I also guilty of that? And, once again, even though while I was writing the book, I wasn't in a relationship, but I wanted to make sure that for future relationships, I increase my odds or chances, if you will, of having more successful relationships with the opposite sex in a romantic manner. I also looked at myself. How do I feel about myself? How do I see myself? How do I view myself? And then also, in the chapter 3, I deal with not only being intimate with yourself, but also with your family members. We know many of our families are broken. People aren't speaking to each other and things of that nature. But, and then we have friends. I don't know what kind of friendship people are calling today, because that's not the kind of friendship I grew up with. But when we have truly grabbed hold of intimacy, the pure intimacy, the undefiled intimacy, and when we truly come to understand what it is, we will improve all of our relationships. I'm telling you, because once again, as I was writing this book, and even after I wrote it, it has improved me a whole lot. People who know me, they will tell you, listen, Nodella is not the same person from 5 years ago. Nodella is not the same person from 2 years ago. Because I often think about my book, and I think about the things that I wrote in it, and I'm assessing myself. Because once again, if somebody asks me a question about my book, I don't want to be a hypocrite about it, but I want to be able to truly conversate with them and express to them or share with them what exactly I meant in my book. So, Derek, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. So at 7:33, are you gonna still hang on, or are you gonna log off?
Hang on for a couple of more minutes,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna have to drop off.
Okay, great. All right. So I want you to comment before you log off.
Well, so I mean, the thing that you addressed, Nodella, is spot on. I think the thing that people tend to forget about is self.
Yes.
Self-growing, self-deserve. And when I say self-deserve, it's what you know what you deserve.
Yes.
You know what you're not going to settle for.
Yes.
You know the difference between the things that you don't want. Mm-hmm. You've seen it. You said I wouldn't. I used to tell people, never say that you won't be in a situation, because you may be that person in that situation if you don't look out what's going on in your circumstance.
Yes.
So you have to look at things that prevent you from going and putting yourself in that situation.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Derek, for taking the time to tune in. I know you got to get ready for school and prep for your class. But so next week, everybody, I just want to let you know Derek will be back on, and Derek will actually be taking the helm on the discussion next week. So look for the flyer and for the invitation for next week. But I'm not logging off. I just wanted to just acknowledge my co-host Derek Walker for taking the time to tune in, even though he has some studying to do for school. And we greatly appreciate your insight. And we look forward to doing the video, but we might have to come back on tomorrow to kind of finish with these dealing with these 8 types of intimacies, because I only talked about 2 of them in the broadcast, and I just really kind of want to bring them out because I want to also give us all something to think about in the meantime. In terms of the different types of intimacies this writer is talking about. He's talking about aesthetic intimacy, recreational intimacy, intellectual intimacy, spiritual intimacy, unconditional intimacy. He talks about physical intimacy, and he talks about emotional intimacy. So he does have 2 of mine on his list, but most of what he has on his list, I don't have on my list as types of intimacy. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's why we're talking about it, to understand what is he talking about, because I know what I'm talking about regarding intimacy. It's about making us whole, causing us to be whole, starting from the spiritual aspect, and then moving into the other types of intimacy. Okay, so Derek has now logged off. So the thing of it is that my goal is that we start from the spiritual intimacy and then we work our way into the other types of intimacy. And like I said, in my book, I talk about 5.5 or 6 types of intimacies, because that is what the Spirit of God gave me to address, because that's truly what people really need. When we look at the word aesthetic intimacy and recreational intimacy, your average person don't even understand what that means. And your average person really is not going to spend a lot of time trying to develop another type of intimacy when they haven't even developed any other type of intimacy. So I guess you can say perhaps my book is based on the core intimacies. And like I said, I'm not dismissing what this person wrote, but their points were not clear enough. So I don't know if this was just because it's online, this is abbreviated, and perhaps the individual has a full book. After the broadcast, I am going to go and look up and see if they have a book. And if they do, I'm going to order it, because I want to understand more what it is that they're talking about regarding their understanding of their different types of intimacies that they've identified. And so once again is that, as we, just think about how when we get into relationships, we don't identify that I want to be intimate with another individual. We just say, well, I want to get into a relationship with someone. And I want us to come from, if you will, that barbaric sense of thinking, well, I just want to be in a relationship. No, we should start identifying unshamedly that I want to be intimate with someone. And once again, we're not talking about the sexual intimacy. We're talking about when I want us to get to the point that when we say, I want to be intimate with someone, I want us to be specific and what type of intimacy we want. I don't want us just to say, as a general statement that, well, I want to be intimate. I want to be in a relationship. Well, why do you want to be in the relationship? Do you long for the mental intimacy? Do you long for verbal intimacy? Do you long for emotional intimacy? Do you long for spiritual intimacy? What is our reason for wanting to be intimate with someone? And once again, I'm not talking about the sexual intimacy. I'm talking about the other types of intimacies. But many of us, we don't identify that. When we say we want to be in a relationship, it's automatically known that sex is going to be part of the relationship one way or the other, or eventually. But I want us to identify What are we looking to gain from that relationship? Because truthfully, if you're not really looking to gain anything from that relationship, you're not seeking out intimacy. And like I said, is that when you have one who's seeking out intimacy for a relationship or in a relationship and one not, your best bet is not to even get involved in that individual who's not even interested in having a relationship based on intimacy. And once again, we're not talking about sexual intimacy because we know that's eventual. But we're talking about the other types of intimacy that when you say you want to be in a relationship, what are you looking for from that individual? Are you able to articulate to that individual, well, yes, I want to be in an intimate relationship. And okay, so what are you looking for? And I believe this is why many relationships have the ups and downs that they do, because we have not, many of us have not taken the time to say, well, why do I want to be in a relationship? Why do I want to have an intimate relationship with someone else? And that even is applicable to if you're just looking to have a friend, to have a homegirl that you can hang out with, or if you have a homeboy that you can hang out with. Still, what is your purpose? You still need to identify. Why do I want to have intimacy, whether with a significant other or just a good friend, someone who I can call and chit chat with, or we can go and hang, whether it's to the movies or wherever you may decide to go. But still, what is our purpose for wanting that? And it's not enough just for us to have the desire to be in a relationship. We really must say, I want an intimate relationship. And this is where I am myself, is that I don't want to be in a relationship just to say I'm in a relationship with someone, but I'm looking for that intimacy connection. And whether the intimacy connection is spiritual and or mental and or emotional and or verbal and or non-sexual, physical and or sexual, I need to identify before I even step out and it truly began to deliberately search out somebody. I need to establish first and foremost, why do I want this? Because if you don't establish that beforehand, once you get into that relationship, like I said, people can fake it and say, oh no, my relationship is fine. My relationship is solid, blah, blah, blah. Okay, your relationship is solid. Okay, if you say so. But I'm talking to those of us who are willing to admit that either the relationship you're in now, no, it's not solid. That the relationship that you desire to have, you're not ready for it because you have not taken the time, like I just said, to explain or to say to yourself, why do I want this relationship? Why do I want to be intimate with anyone? Once again, even whether it's with God, whether it's a significant other, whether it's with a friend or family member. And we need to also get comfortable and confident in stating, I want an intimate relationship, and not just say, well, I just want a relationship. Let's just be boyfriend and girlfriend or be significant other, because that's the identification they're using now. It's not enough just to keep saying, oh, we're just going to do what we're going to do until, we get tired or whatever the case may be. Why waste your time on any kind of relationship that you're not willing to invest in because you don't want to be intimate? And so this broadcast in my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, it is for those who desire to reach a higher place and a deeper place in intimacy concerning all of their relationships. Enough with just having the same old mediocre relationship. If people would be honest with themselves, a lot of people are truly unsatisfied with their relationships. And it's not even necessarily that the other person is doing something wrong. It's because within yourself, you have not identified what kind of intimate relationship you want. What is it that you're looking for from the relationship? And then you also must convey it to that individual that you're desiring to be intimate with. And that's including God. Absolutely. That's including God. When you want to be intimate with God in however way, you need to say, God, I want to be intimate with you tonight verbally, which means you want to have a conversation. You want to have a dialogue. And it's not a rushed conversation, but it's a conversation that can go on for an hour, for 2 hours, 3 hours, or 5 hours. Y'all know how we go in the natural. We do the same in the natural. Why can't we do the same with God? And so I really hope that for those of you who have tuned in, and if you would be honest with yourself and say that, yes, I do have moments of intimacy with my husband or with my wife or even with my friends or family members, but I would like to take it to another level, then this broadcast is for you. And that is that if you want to take that intimate relationship to another level, then you have to decide, what is it that you want? What is it that you feel you need in order to take that intimate relationship to another level? And like I said, remember, when I say intimate relationship, I'm not talking about sexual only. I'm talking more importantly about the others more so than the sexual, because it's easy to have sexual intimacy. I don't want to get too deep into that because that's going to be like a whole nother probably 2 hours. But I just want to say is that most people are satisfied with their sexual intimacy life. So my focus is on the others, the spiritual intimacy, the mental intimacy, the emotional intimacy, the verbal intimacy, and the non-sexual physical intimacy. So you have to decide, what is it that I need to do, or what is it that I want in order for this intimate relationship to go to the next level? Once you've decided and once you've identified that I'm not getting or I'm not able to enjoy verbal intimacy as much as I want, which means that you and your partner, you don't talk as much as you would like, or you may not talk about the things that you desire to talk about, or even with your friends or even with your family. And just to remind y'all that intimacy or intimate in Latin means to have a close relationship, to have a close friendship. All right. So when I talk about your friends and your family, that's why I bring in family and friends as well, because intimacy is not only limited to the romantic type of intimacy, but it's part of, or should be part of, all of our relationships, whether it's with your husband and your wife or your significant other or your family or your friends, and even down to yourself. But before we can mandate from someone else what we want in intimacy, we need to identify it. And then we need to have a conversation with them about it. Because you can't say, well, I'm not satisfied with my life of verbal intimacy. And then you just kind of start trying to force the other individual into taking your verbal intimacy to another level. You can't force them when they don't even know what's going on. And so we need to let them know, to say, listen, even with your girlfriend, if you have a girlfriend, I'm talking about a girly friend, like a sister friend, who's always calling you with drama, always calling you whining, complaining, and crying, and you're okay with those conversations at times, but you don't want it to be that kind of conversation all the time. You want to talk about other things, then you need to tell your girly friend, listen, I'm here for you. And I don't mind sometimes when you call me and you need somebody to vent to, you need a shoulder to cry on, I don't mind. But I'm not satisfied with our intimate verbal relationship, because you always call, whine, cry, complain, and all that stuff. And then I never get a chance to say anything, because then you're like, okay, I gotta go. That's a one-sided relationship. So you need to have a conversation with your homegirl. You need to have a conversation with your homeboy. If it's with a sibling, you need to tell your sibling, listen, I don't mind, I love talking to you. But every time you call, you're always complaining and you're always talking negative and you're always, the conversation isn't always what I desire it to be, which is a healthy, verbal, intimate conversation. And I would like for us to be able to have more enjoyable conversations by talking about happier things, more pleasant things. Talk about if you have grandchildren, or talk about, just talk about other things than just the complaining. You need to convey that to them, because until you do, that intimate relationship, whether it's spiritual, mental, emotional, verbal, or non-sexual, physical, it's going to remain as is until you say something to them. And they may not even realize it. And I know some people don't realize it, truthfully, because they're self-absorbed. It's all about them. Anytime they get on the phone, it's all about them. But if you want to have more meaningful, if you want to take your intimate relation to another level, you need to identify what you want, and then you need to share it with the person that it's involved with. Even if it comes down that it's you need to say to self, this is what we need to do. We need to take this intimate relationship to another level. And so this is what I leave with you all tonight, is that if we are desiring more fulfilling intimate relationships, non-sexual, I just feel the need, because we've been taught for so many generations that sexual intimacy is pretty much the only kind of intimacy that we can have. That's what society has trained us to think, and that's not the case. And we need to move beyond just when we hear the word intimate or intimacy, automatically we want to start thinking, oh, they must be talking about sex. Well, I don't think so. And so I want us to become confident. I want us to be more conscious about intimacy. Because if that's what we're desiring, then this is what we need to become more conscious about. And we also need to become confident in it. I was talking to a colleague just the other day, was today Thursday, on Tuesday, and it might have been, no, it was Tuesday. And we was talking about Ancestry.com, because she has the last name of my father's mother, which is my grandmother, obviously. And I asked her about her family and stuff. And so we started talking. And I was telling her about an incident that happened with Ancestry.com. Somebody said, oh, you got the wrong person in their tree because the person was white. And so I shared with the lady, I said, listen, first and foremost, lady, we don't want nothing from you. We don't want nothing from your family. We're just trying to connect, and so forth and so on. And so I shared with the young lady, I said, what she failed to realize, I'm a 2-time published author. I'm about to release my 3rd and 4th book. So in a minute, I'm about to become well known, even more so. And so she was like, oh, so what did you write the books about? So I began to tell her about the first book, The Intimate Place. And then I began to talk to her about the second book, Sassy, The Perfect Life. And she was like, oh, wow. And I said, do you realize we're having an intimate conversation right now? I said, we're being intimate now verbally. And she was like, yeah. I wasn't trying to sell my book. I'm just helping her to understand that, and to also help her to recognize in future conversations with anybody, I'm having an intimate conversation with somebody and ain't nobody thinking about sex. And so if you are looking for, if you are desiring to have a more fulfilling life of intimacy in all forms, you need to identify what it is you're looking for. You need to identify which one or which ones that you want. Once you've identified the one or the many or the multiple, then you need to, if it involves someone other than yourself, then you need to speak with them about that, so they will understand and know where you are coming from. In order for your relationship to improve, communication needs to improve. They can't read your mind. They're not going to be able to read your mind to say, oh, this is what you want. No, you need to have a conversation. And then you might even be surprised to find out they were feeling the same way. And like I said, I'm not just talking about an intimate partner. I'm talking about with a family member. I'm talking about with a friend, or even with God. You may find out that those are their feeling, they was feeling exactly the same. And so communication, we know, in any and in all relationships is key. It's vital. It's very important. Without communication, then what are we saying? We're not talking. And so I hope those of you who have tuned in tonight, and those of you who's going to watch the replay, that you will take to heart what I'm saying about developing, strengthening, and becoming more confident, as well as definitely becoming more conscious about intimacy. Don't be afraid to use the word intimate or intimacy. Listen, folk ain't afraid to use whatever words they're using. And the only way that society is going to change their mindset about intimacy is that if somebody starts talking about it, if somebody reintroduces intimacy into our conversations, into all of our relationships, it will eventually spread, just like any other fad, just like any other, new thing on the block. When people hear about, oh, the Apple, somebody went and bought the Apple 9. I don't know what level they on, but I'm just saying, Apple 9. But they go and share, yo, I got an Apple 9. You did? What is it like? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm going to go get me one. Then they talk about the Apple 9, and then they go and share, and then so now you have 1 million people with the Apple 9. Why? All because somebody introduced it. And in the case of intimacy, it's being reintroduced back into society. So the sooner we start reintroducing intimacy back into society, the more we will see to start overtaking society. And we will start hearing more people use not only the word intimate or intimacy, but we will even see it in our behaviors. We will see it in our nonverbal communications. And we will see that it's become part of who we are. And people won't feel embarrassed about it. People won't feel ashamed by using the word. So thank you so very much for everyone for tuning in tonight. I appreciate you. Be sure to join us next week. Next week is also going to be a great topic. I tell you, we are so excited about the relaunching of Intimate Talk live broadcast. We are looking to do some great and mighty things with this broadcast. So I hope that you will continue to tune in and definitely follow us. If you're not following Intimate Talk, please follow Intimate Talk, as well as like our page. I'm working on becoming more active on the page in between the broadcasts as well, to leave content for those of you who are hungry and who's desiring to better their life of intimacy. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me through instant messaging or direct messaging, whatever is being called now. Please feel free to reach out to me. My phone number also is on the page as well, so you can reach out, send me a text, because if you call, you're automatically going to be blocked if you're not a contact in my phone. So text me first and say, hey, Nodella, this is so-and-so. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about either Intimate Talk or either of my books. Right now, we're focusing on The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, but we are eventually going to get to my other books as well. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I really hope that this broadcast has brought some enlightenment to you regarding sexual intimacy. And let me say this disclaimer before I close. In no way do I nor Derek portray, and we don't want to come across as if our broadcast is the one and only and we have all the answers, because we don't. We are sharing with you based on the knowledge and the experience that we have. And we also have the Holy Spirit, who also is helping us to help you. I know some of you may say, well, I'm not into God and all that stuff. I understand that. But you can still take away something from our broadcast. So we are not going to apologize. We're not going to shy away from mentioning God or talking about the Word of God, talking about the Bible, talking about Scripture, because He's the one who started all of this. It is He who has given me the vision to even write this book that has been such a blessing to so many people. And I want to let you brothers know, listen, I have had as many men, actually more men, to purchase my book, The Intimate Place, My God, My Man, Myself, than I did women. Believe it or not. And I got a couple of marriage proposals out of it too that I declined. But I just want to let you know how much this book has been effective in the lives of so many others. So if you're still teetering, tottering over whether you want to order your copy, listen, my book has been on sale at 50% off for the past week. I may have it up there just for one more week at 50% off. My book normally costs $9.99, but it is now $5. So I want to encourage you, if you already have a copy, but if you want to bless somebody else, I urge you to order your copy before next week. I'll probably take the sale off by next Saturday or next Sunday, which will be, I think, March 6th or March 7th. So if you know somebody who could really be blessed by this book, be sure to order your copy. Now, when you order from me directly, the sale is only applicable when you order directly from me. However, my book is available on Amazon. I think Barnes & Noble still may have it, but then also my printing company, Xulon Press, Xulon Press. You can Google them as well, and I can also tag their website in the broadcast after it's done, if you're also interested in ordering a copy from my printing company. So I just want to once again thank you so very much for tuning in tonight, and I hope that I have said something that will help you to better your life of intimacy. And once again, definitely reach out to me and let me know how the broadcast is helping you. And like I said, please share the broadcast, invite people who can benefit from the broadcast as well, because I'm telling you, this conversation, this broadcast is definitely going to get hot and heavy. So until next time, everyone, have yourself a wonderful, wonderful evening, and I look forward to talking to you later. Have a great night.